Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every life when the mirror speaks louder than the world. When the question isn't, what do they think of me? But instead, who do I believe I am? That moment, though quiet, is where greatness begins. Greatness is not handed down like a family heirloom. It's not something you're born into, gifted by others, or wrapped in a title or spotlight. Greatness is something you grow into, step by step, choice by choice. It's a decision you make in the stillness of the morning, in the chaos of challenge, in the integrity of how you show up for your life, especially when it would be easier not to. We live in a world that often celebrates outcomes more than origins. The awards, the applause, the achievements, those are the things people tend to see. But true greatness isn't found on a stage. It starts within. It is cultivated in how you think, how you lead yourself, and how you treat others when there's no reward in sight. Think of the people who've inspired you most in your life. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you before you believed in yourself. A parent who worked tirelessly without ever asking for praise. A mentor who saw your potential when you couldn't yet see it. What made them great wasn't perfection. It was their character. It was their commitment to show up with purpose, again and again. And here's what's remarkable. That same seed of greatness lives in you. Not in some far-off, idealized version of you, but in the real, flawed, beautiful, evolving you that exists right now. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait until you're more accomplished, more confident, or more prepared. The path to greatness opens the moment you decide to take yourself and your purpose seriously. In education, we often focus on what we need to learn. But we also need to unlearn. We need to unlearn the belief that greatness is reserved for the chosen few. We need to unlearn the idea that we must wait for the perfect moment. Because the truth is, greatness grows through practice, through repetition, through the daily act of rising to meet your life with presence and integrity. Greatness is found in the small things. Waking up early to chase your vision, even when no one claps. Listening deeply to someone else, even when your schedule is full. Choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. These moments may not feel grand, but they are the building blocks of character, and character is the soil where greatness grows. Now, some of you might be thinking, but I've made too many mistakes, or I'm too far behind. Let me remind you, greatness does not require a perfect past. It only asks for a committed present. It is not about never falling. It's about what you choose each time you rise. And every time you get back up with wisdom, with humility, with fire in your soul, you become stronger, sharper, more capable of leading your life with power. Ladies and gentlemen, every choice you make writes the story of your life. And every great story begins with a powerful decision to show up fully, to give your best, to stand in truth. That doesn't mean you won't be afraid. It doesn't mean you'll always feel ready. But greatness doesn't require the absence of fear. It only requires the presence of courage. So ask yourself today, what am I waiting for? What would happen if I stopped shrinking, stopped delaying, stopped doubting? What if today was the day I started treating my life like it mattered? Because it does. You matter. Your voice matters. Your gifts matter. And the world is waiting not for perfection, but for authenticity. For someone brave enough to live out loud. You don't need the world's permission to begin. You don't need all the answers to take the first step. What you need is to believe not just in the idea of greatness, but in your capacity to live it. Because when you understand that greatness is not some distant destination, but a daily decision, you stop looking outside yourself for validation. You begin to trust the process. You begin to own your power. And in doing so, you light a path not just for yourself, but for others watching. Others waiting. Others wondering if they too can begin. That is the quiet, powerful truth. When you choose to rise, you become a mirror for what is possible. Greatness begins with you. Not someday, not after you feel more prepared, but right now in this moment when you choose to live with courage, to walk with purpose, and to lead your life from the inside out. Inside every one of us is something waiting to be expressed, something deeper than ambition, louder than fear, and stronger than doubt. It doesn't always arrive with fanfare or clarity. It often comes as a whisper, a pull, a feeling in your spirit that says, there is more to this life for you. There is something only you can do. That is your calling. And understanding that every individual carries a unique calling is one of the most powerful truths you can ever embrace. A calling is not about fame. It's not always about success in the way the world measures it. It is about alignment. It's about waking up each day and choosing to live in a way that honors your deepest truth, your values, your gifts. It's about truly listening to the nudges in your heart that tell you where you are meant to grow, serve, and show up. We often underestimate the impact of our lives. We compare, we doubt, we delay. We think, who am I to make a difference? But I want to ask you instead, who are you not to? If there is something in you, an idea, a passion, a deep desire to contribute that keeps coming back to you, that keeps whispering even when you try to quiet it, that is not random. That is your calling trying to break through the noise. Education is often seen as the act of learning facts, earning degrees, or building skills. And while all of that matters, the most profound education is the one that teaches you how to hear your own voice. It's the kind that helps you look inward and say, what makes me come alive? What work feels like love in motion for me? Where do I lose track of time and find meaning in what I'm doing? Because when you find that place, you found the gateway to your purpose. Each person's calling is different. For one, it might be to teach. For another, to heal, to build, to write, to lead, to create, to uplift. And here's the truth, it doesn't have to look impressive to be important. A person living fully in their calling, whether they are speaking to thousands or caring for one, is doing sacred work. When you live with intention, when you honor your gifts, and give them away in service of something greater than yourself, you are walking in your purpose. We live in a world that often encourages imitation. But your power is not in being a copy of someone else. Your power lies in being deeply and unapologetically you. There's no competition for your calling. No one else can express it the way you can. No one else has your combination of experience, personality, vision, and voice. That is not an accident, that is design. But here's what many don't talk about. Stepping into your calling is not always comfortable. In fact, it can be inconvenient, uncertain, and even scary. It asks you to leave the familiar. It asks you to stretch, to grow, to face the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. Because the truth is, before your calling can impact others, it must transform you. It begins by paying attention. Notice what makes you feel lit from within. Notice what keeps pulling you back, no matter how many times you try to set it aside. Notice where your joy meets the world's need. That's where the magic happens. That's the intersection of fulfillment and service. The world is full of people waiting for the right moment. Waiting for more time, more money, more confidence. But the most extraordinary people didn't wait, they began. Even in doubt, even in fear, even with limited resources, they took the first step. They said yes to their calling before they had the full plan. And in saying yes, the path revealed itself. Acting on your calling does not mean the road will be smooth. It means it will be worth it. You will face resistance both from outside and within. But the moment you begin to live aligned with your purpose, something shifts. You become more grounded, more focused, more fulfilled, and most importantly, you become a vessel for impact. Because when you live in alignment with who you are, you naturally elevate others. So many people are walking through life feeling unseen, unheard, and unsure of their place in the world. But when one person dares to answer their calling, it sends out a signal: it's possible. It's real. It's worth it. That's what your life can be, not just a journey for yourself, but a light for others. Ladies and gentlemen, your calling is not outside of you. It's already within. And the moment you stop waiting and start listening, you begin a process that can shift not just your own life, but the lives of everyone you touch. There comes a moment in life when we stop pointing fingers at the world, at our parents, at the system, at our circumstances, and we start looking inward. That moment, though it may be uncomfortable, is the beginning of all true transformation. Because greatness is not found in blaming what we cannot control, it is built when we take full, honest, and compassionate responsibility for what we can. Personal responsibility is not about perfection. It's not about taking on more than you should or blaming yourself for everything that happens around you. No. It's about owning your decisions, your mindset, and your growth. It's about standing in your power and saying, no matter where I started, I get to choose where I go from here. In education, in relationships, in business, in life, nothing changes until we do. We can wish for better. We can dream of more. But until we align our actions with those desires, they remain distant. Personal responsibility is what bridges the gap between wanting and becoming. It's the internal shift that says, if it's going to happen, I have a role in making it so. We live in a time when it's easy to hand over our power, to say, they didn't give me a chance, or it's just the way things are. But here's what's true. Even in the most limiting environments, people have risen. Even in the face of injustice and hardship, people have created beauty, purpose, and change. Not because it was easy, but because they decided to own what they could and work with it. That decision is powerful. That decision is where growth begins. When you take responsibility for your life, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see possibilities where before you only saw problems. You stop waiting for someone to come and save you, and instead you become your own solution. You shift from being reactive to proactive, from blaming to building, from surviving to leading. Personal responsibility asks us to get honest. Honest about how we show up. Honest about the habits we've developed. Honest about whether we're making excuses or making progress. This honesty is not meant to shame you. It's meant to awaken you. Because once you realize you are the author of your own story, you stop living on autopilot and start creating intentionally. Think about any great transformation, any meaningful achievement. Behind it, you will find someone who decided to take responsibility not just for what they wanted, but for the work it required. They said, I won't just hope for success. I'll show up for it. I'll do what needs to be done. I'll own my mistakes. I'll learn. I'll grow. I'll stay in the process, even when it's hard. Because here's the truth. Transformation isn't magic. It's discipline. It's consistency. It's making choices today that your future self will thank you for even when no one else is watching. Responsibility teaches you to hold yourself to a higher standard, not because you have to, but because you know your life deserves it. And yes, taking responsibility means letting go of blame. It means refusing to stay stuck in a story that says, I can't move forward because of what happened to me. What happened to you may not have been your fault. But healing, rising, building that is your responsibility. That is where your freedom lives. That is where your power returns. Let me tell you something. No one else can live your life for you. No one else can speak your truth, walk your path, or fulfill your potential. That's on you. And that's a beautiful thing because it means no one can take that away from you either. When you embrace responsibility, you reclaim your ability to shape your destiny. This doesn't mean you won't stumble. You will. But when you've committed to personal responsibility, even your failures become fuel. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes a teacher. You begin to see challenges not as stop signs, but as invitations to rise. And the ripple effect, it's real. When you live with responsibility, people notice. You become an example. You lead by how you live. You teach others that excuses are easy, but excellence is a choice. You show that integrity matters, that showing up matters, that effort, commitment, and accountability are not old-fashioned, they are essential. Responsibility builds resilience. It builds credibility. It builds self-respect. And those are the foundations of lasting success, not just in your career, but in your relationships, your health, your happiness, your legacy. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're waiting for the world to change, start with you. If you want a better outcome, look at your input. If you're seeking transformation, step up and take ownership of your journey. This is not a burden, it's a privilege. It means your future is not dependent on anyone else. It means you have a say. It means you have the power. Because greatness does not begin when the world gives you a green light. Greatness begins when you take responsibility for every step forward, no matter how small. And in doing so, you become unstoppable, not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. There is something truly powerful about a person who knows who they are. Not in arrogance, not in ego, but in quiet, rooted certainty. A person who walks into the room, not seeking validation, but bringing value. A person who doesn't need to be the loudest voice because their presence speaks volumes. That kind of power comes from one place believing in your own worth and purpose. You cannot empower others from an empty place. You cannot give what you do not believe you have. And so many people go through life pouring into others, hoping that somehow it will validate their own value. But the real, lasting impact begins when you first do the inner work to believe that you matter, that your voice, your experience, your dreams are not just important, they are essential. Think about it. When you believe in your own worth, you carry yourself differently. You set boundaries with grace. You speak truth with compassion. You lead not to control, but to inspire. And when people see you living with that kind of integrity, they don't just follow, they rise. Your belief in yourself becomes permission for them to do the same. Let's be clear, believing in your worth is not about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's about knowing you're not less than anyone else. It's about breaking the cycle of shrinking, doubting, and comparing. It's about standing in the mirror and seeing someone who is whole, capable, and worthy of being here right now, just as you are. This belief doesn't happen overnight. For many of us, it has to be rebuilt, especially if it's been chipped away by criticism, trauma, or environments that made us feel small. But the beauty is this: worth is not something you earn, it's something you recognize. It's always been there. And the moment you decide to honor it, everything begins to shift. Education often focuses on what you know, but rarely does it teach you to know yourself. Yet, that is the foundation of true empowerment. When you understand your values, your strengths, your story, you become a force. Not because you're perfect, but because you're clear. Clarity breeds confidence. And confidence rooted in purpose has the power to ignite transformation in others. Purpose is not always a grand, sweeping mission. Sometimes it's found in the smallest acts, teaching a child to read, standing up for what's right, being a steady voice in the chaos, building something that lasts. Your purpose is the unique way you bring light to the world. And when you live in alignment with it, people feel it. They are drawn to it. They are empowered by it. So many people are waiting to feel confident before they take action. But the truth is, confidence comes after the action. It comes from doing the thing afraid, from showing up uncertain but committed, from deciding to trust yourself even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. Every time you do that, your sense of worth deepens. And the deeper it gets, the more freely you empower others. Here's something important to understand. Your belief in yourself is not selfish. It is service. Because when you show others what it looks like to honor your own worth, you give them permission to honor theirs. When you speak your truth, others find their voice. When you walk in purpose, you light a path. You don't empower others by rescuing them. You empower them by reminding them of who they are. Think of the most impactful leaders, teachers, mentors, friends in your life. Chances are they weren't just kind or skilled, they were anchored. They knew who they were, and that knowing allowed them to pour into others without losing themselves. That's what makes empowerment sustainable. It flows from a well that's been filled from within. In schools, workplaces, homes, and communities, the people who empower others consistently are the ones who have done the inner work. They've wrestled with insecurity. They've learned how to forgive themselves. They've chosen to believe they are worthy not because someone said so, but because they decided so. And that decision, that inner commitment, is the beginning of their impact. Empowerment isn't about giving people all the answers. It's about helping them remember that they have the strength to find their own. And you can only do that effectively when you first remembered it for yourself. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to make a difference in the lives of others, start by believing in your own. Start by waking up in the morning and choosing to honor your presence, your potential, and your power. Not someday, not when things are more perfect, but now. Start by being the kind of person who doesn't just talk about purpose, but lives it. Because once you believe in your own worth, you stop competing and start contributing. You stop chasing applause and start creating impact. You stop waiting for someone else to lead, and you become the one others look to when they need a light. So let this be your invitation to look inward, to stand taller, to claim your space. Because when you believe in yourself, you give others permission to do the same. And that, more than anything, is how we change the world. As we come to a close, let me remind you of one simple, unshakable truth. Greatness has never been something reserved for the chosen few. It is not determined by where you were born, what you have, or what others expect of you. Greatness begins the moment you choose to believe that your life matters, that your purpose is real, and that your potential is waiting not in the distant future, but right now. We've explored how discovering your calling is not about following someone else's script. It's about listening to your own soul. We've talked about the power of honoring that inner voice that refuses to be silenced. We've embraced the strength that comes from taking responsibility for your growth, your mindset, and your future. And we've witnessed how believing in your own worth is not just a personal victory, it is the spark that lights a flame in everyone around you. You do not need anyone's permission to rise. You do not need perfect conditions to begin. You only need a decision to stop playing small, a decision to take ownership of your gifts, a decision to show up for your own life with courage, with purpose, and with love. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you are just starting to listen to that quiet inner voice, or you've already begun walking your path, know this: you are not behind. You are not too late. You are exactly where you need to be to take your next step. And that next step, it could be the beginning of everything. Greatness does not wait for you to be fearless. It shows up when you decide to be brave. It grows when you live with intention. It thrives when you empower others from the fullness of who you are. You are not here by accident. Your life is not ordinary. And the world needs what only you can give.